four factors. Let's start that. Can you think of other factors they have to assess?
No, sir.
How about unmarked versus marked crosswalks? How about that?
I wouldn't think the Johnsons would know anything about that, sir.
So you think that they may have assumed that they were crossing mid-block?
No, I think they believed that they were crossing at an intersection. Our laws are written to tell people to cross at intersections. As they've, as you pointed out, perhaps crossed numerous streets, we'll assume in their times. They understand they're supposed to cross at intersections. They get to the opposite curb line, they see what appears to be what they perceive as an intersection. I don't know why they would assume that, oh, that's not really an intersection by definition, so we shouldn't cross there. I think they're perfectly within their, proper, reasonable observations to say, yes, this is an intersection, this is where we should cross the highway.
Now, let me answer my question. Sir, should you take into account whether it's a marked or unmarked crosswalk?
No, sir.
Okay. So in your testimony, a reasonable person at night on a road that's 40 miles an hour, maybe a slow walker even.
Is that part of the question?
Yes, unfamiliar with the area, with this road, crossing the street, should not care one way or the other whether or not there's crosswalk markings in front of them when crossing the street. That shouldn't matter. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. I mean, that shouldn't matter because they have a reasonable expectation that they're crossing at an intersection. Yes, sir.
Okay, so it should, sir, I know you understand my question, and I'm not going to move on until you answer. Sir, the fact that there is not lines in the street, paint in the street, crosswalk, marked crosswalk, okay? Don't say intersection, but marked crosswalk. The fact that this alleged crosswalk, this alleged unmarked crosswalk is unmarked, that's what I'm trying to focus on. So, my question to you is this. When you're deciding whether or not to cross the street, you already agreed with me that you, as a pedestrian, have the responsibility to make observations regarding the four factors already outlined. I'm asking you if you should also consider whether or not there's markings in the street versus not, in deciding whether or not it's safe for you to cross when there's a car coming at you.
Objection to the form.
At an intersection, no.
A reasonable person should not feel safer when there's markings on the street than when there are no markings. Is that your testimony today?
If it's an intersection, the pedestrian has an expectation that the vehicle is going to yield the right of way to them.
And I would ask, would you agree that a reasonable person, in making the assessment of safety, right, besides the four factors already discussed, should consider whether or not they're crossing an area that actually has the markings of a crosswalk or not?
No.
No. In the four factors that you agree that they should have considered, you would agree that day is better than night?
In what respect?
Sir, we covered four factors that a pedestrian needed to have considered before deciding to begin crossing the street from the curb. You remember that?
Yes.
And those four factors, I'm going to go one by one. I want to find out from you what's better than the other. Okay? So, the first factor was day and night. You remember that?
I do, sir.
What's better, day or night?
Well, day, because you can see more.
Oh, so day is better?
Sure.
Okay. Familiar versus unfamiliar. What's better, familiar or unfamiliar?
Well, the problem with familiarity, sir, is it breeds contempt. So I'm not willing to say that it's familiar that you're making a safer crossing because you get lackadaisical when you're walking or driving in a familiar area. So to say that familiar is better than unfamiliar, I don't know that I agree with that, sir.
Oh, okay, fair enough. Maybe one's not better than another. We agree that if you're crossing an unfamiliar area, you should be more cautious and more conservative in your decision making.
Yes, I would agree with that.
being conservative in your decision making is if you're not exactly sure whether or not you're going to be able to make it with plenty of time, that we should probably wait until the car passes. Fair?
Well, again, if you don't think you can get across in time, you shouldn't leave the curb, yes.
Now my question, sir. My question to you is being conservative vis-a-vis crossing the street, right, in an unfamiliar location to you, equates to if you're not absolutely sure that you can make it, don't start walking. Fair?
Well, if you don't know you can't make it, then yes, that's fair. You shouldn't cross.
Sir, it's not the question.
Well, I thought I answered the question, sir.
No, sir. My question is very simple. My question is, if you're not absolutely sure that you're going to make it with plenty of time, it would be unsafe to start crossing the street.
Well, it's not a yes or no question, sir, okay? Because, again, when you're crossing the street, if you're not sure you can make it, you might still enter in if you're thinking that you're protected by the crosswalk, sir. So I can't just say that, oh, well, you're absolutely sure. I mean, then maybe the Johnsons would have stood there and still be staying in there now. I don't know, sir. Okay, so I can't just say yes. I mean, I want to take a hypothetical and say, oh, well, you know, if you're absolutely not sure, I don't know if any pedestrian's ever absolutely sure when they leave the curb that they're going to make it unless there's no cars on the highway.
Mr. Norton, let me ask you a couple questions.
Sure.
And maybe then we'll take a break. When the Johnsons approached Route 9 in order to cross it, did they make a conscious decision that this was an unmarked crosswalk?
Objection.
I don't know that the Johnsons understood the difference between unmarked and marked. I think they made a conscious decision that was an intersection and that was the place to cross. So
what is the basis of your opinion that they made a conscious decision that this was an intersection?
Because pedestrians are trained to cross the intersection, and visually, to someone's untrained in the business, like the Johnsons, this looks like an intersection.
What did you have any conversation with Mrs. Johnson to make that determination as to whether they believed this was an intersection?
I'll make a stipulation that he's never talked to Mrs. Johnson, and he said that. So we can save time by not continuing to ask it.
Mr. Nolan, do you know whether, as the Johnsons approached Route 9 in order to cross it, do you know if they made a conscious decision that they had the right of way?
I do not know that, sir.
You indicated that I think you first said that the Johnsons at some point hustled across Route 9, and then I think you kind of changed your testimony and said quickly. Is that correct?
I didn't change my testimony. The word hustle was my word because I don't know exactly what word Mrs. Johnson used.
Do you have an understanding